What's happening, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your attention for the next couple minutes or several minutes. We're going to talk on the topic of my 3 favorite quad exercises, and everything is presented, at least on my end, in some sort of context. It's just really challenging for me to say these are the 3 best quad exercises that, as an umbrella statement, are going to be the best for everyone. So we're going to dive into those guys. But first, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel because I'm going to be putting out a lot more content relative to this and other things about training in the gym very frequently. So you're not going to want to miss out on that. It's going to be 100% for free. Also, the execution program has launched. It's open for now. I'm opening it up only to 15, all right? 15 participants, and I'm going to cap it. This is your opportunity to have one-on-one coaching with me for a very affordable rate, much, much cheaper than if you were here in Tampa actually training with me 3 to 4 times a week. So this is your best opportunity to get information like this literally every day and some, so that you can take your training to the next level. That link is in the comments section or the description section of this, along with the timestamps of this video for you to take advantage of that, but only while registration is open. When it's closed or when everybody has filled those 15 spots, you're out. Okay, so we're going to cover 3 different exercises, but before we do, I'm going to talk on this board. That right there says prerequisites. And for everything when it comes to training a body part, there should be some sort of list or tally sheet of check boxes where you have some prerequisites that you feel like need to be marked off in order for you to say, well, this is going to be an exercise that I have in my quad rotation. So for me, I kind of keep it pretty basic, at least in today's video, so that you can get an idea of why I chose what I chose with the three exercises. But it can be extensive depending on how specific your training goal is and also what your long-term goal is with your body or your shape or your health. But with everything, first off, you want to have an exercise that has no pain. So even if on paper, or even if every textbook all across the world printed this is the best exercises to grow your quads, and all you feel is ouch in that, well then that may not be the best exercise. Number 2, it should be an exercise that over time after you practice it, you develop some sort of confidence in. You do that exercise, you're building the skill of that, and you're going, you know what, when I get in here, I really feel like I can have high quality work. Number 3, I like to choose exercises that have a large ROM, which is short for range of motion. So large range of motion equals when our output and our skill gets higher, large range of motion exercises equal more energy to be used. And also it's going to accrue more tissue trauma. So if you are in the game of trying to build your quads in today's video, well then you want to have an exercise that requires a lot of output, that requires a lot of energy, and beats the heck out of those quads very effectively without having to beat yourself to a pulp as a whole body goes. We just want to train the quads. We want to train them effectively. I like large ranges of motion for that. Okay. Also, what I like is not necessarily an exercise machine or application that allows me to brace and has stability, but the exercise application in it, I have a good command over bracing. So whether that means something that has a little bit more stability, where that machine has some kind of environment where I'm able to brace more easily and not have to think about it, or whether I just have a good management over my own personal bracing, I think that is a prerequisite for anything that you're going to train from an exercise standpoint. And then also, not necessarily that the strength profile or the profile of the exercise, where it's hardest, where it's easiest, where it loads the most, where it drops off. It doesn't have to always be perfect because that's in the context of what you're trying to get out of that exercise. It's also within the context of that individual workout, maybe from a stimulus goal. So it doesn't have to be a perfect profile, but it needs to be a profile of your liking, which means it fits that goal specific region. It is whatever you're looking to get out of that exercise. And within that, even more basic, you just need to have an understanding of what that profile is and where the benefit is. For example, we'll use the general free weight squat. If I did quarter reps out of the top and I did 10 of them, or if I did repetitions all the way to that bottom of the squat and did quarter repetitions there, which one's going to be hardest? It's going to be the bottom quarter, because the hardest part of that profile is in the lengthened position, in the bottom of that squat. So knowing and understanding that, having a profile to my liking, maybe that exercise, I'm choosing that because I want to master my quads in their stretched position. Or maybe I'm looking for an exercise that I'm able to load very, very heavily in the lengthened position. So that profile meets that standard, okay? And then from there, the last one is, no matter what I choose, I want to have something that I can just progress. And that's in many different variables. It gives me versatility to progress my management of the range of motion. It gives me the ability to increase my output in the extreme ranges of motion. It gives me the ability to get stronger in it. It gives me the ability to get more efficient with my contractions. And it gives me the ability to increase maybe my muscle mass because of the other parameters of the previous 5. So you just want to have something to where on paper, if you did it every single week, every single leg exercise, you're able to progress that every single time. Maybe not linearly, maybe not all the time you're going to have a PR in something, but some variables should be always improving throughout the entirety of you changing this exercise. And that's what makes it a favorite exercise in my book. So hopefully you guys are with me so far. At this point, you can pause this video, because if you have a question on this, by all means, put it in the comments, give me a question, and I'm going to answer it, okay? If not, go ahead and hit that play button or keep it rolling. And we're going to get into the first favorite quad exercise. Now, I gave the context of what I'm using for why I chose this exercise, because again, it needs to have some specificity to it. There's a lot of reasons why a person would say, I like this exercise. And I just want to give you exercises that have the context of, if I'm trying to improve this, then this is why I chose this exercise. So the first one is, if my goal is to improve coordination, wow, coordination, 5 syllables, a lot to spell there. If my goal is to improve coordination with my squat training, or I'm giving it away, with my quad training, I like to do some sort of a free weight squat. So I'm going to give 2 of them right here. My favorite options in this case, so my first choice on the list is some sort of a barbell squat or a split squat. Now, just think within those how many different applications of versatility that there are. Within the barbell squat, you have a front squat, you have a back squat. Inside that back squat, you have a high bar squat, you have a low bar squat. You also have a safety bar squat, you have a cambered bar squat, you have a heel elevated squat, you have a hip dominant squat. Like, what are we looking for? We're looking for some sort of an application that allows me to be as knee dominant as possible. And what does that exactly mean? That means my knees over my toes, which is maxing out my dorsiflexion. Okay, knees over toes, maxing out my dorsiflexion. It's that point where my heels want to come off the floor. That's what I'm trying to max out there. I'm trying to get my knees as far away from my hips. So I want those 2 things at the same time. Knees over toes, knees away from hips, okay? So kneecap away from hips. And then also I want as much hip flexing as possible. That's the goal. When I'm choosing that, I'm trying to get this range of motion happening. So I'm trying to max this out at the same time that I max this out. That is a very knee dominant, quad dominant squat, okay? The ideal scenario of that is all of those happening at the same time. Now, I'm just going to, again, give an umbrella statement that doesn't fit everybody, but it gives some guidelines. For most people, that means a higher bar setting, so a higher bar, all right? For people who have longer femurs and shorter torsos, or for people that seem to have some mobility issues either in their ankles or in their hips, okay, The split squat tends to be a little bit better because you have more of an ability to get a little bit of this happening. You have some options to do some rotating at your torso to overcome those setbacks in mobility. It doesn't mean that you're not flexible. It means structurally that you have some limitations that don't necessarily allow for that high bar setting to be possible. Going back to the barbell setting, in that high bar setting, the most fitting and most suitable application for most people is going to be a safety bar, because then we're not limiting ourselves by our shoulder mobility. We just literally have to grab those really handy, those really cool handy dandy handles that are attached to it, okay? Or a front squat. Again, I don't have any issue. My only limitation is my ability to hold that kind of in that little armpit area that's at the acromion process and the front delt, that little gap there, okay? And my traps ability to kind of hold this posture without wanting to fall over. That's the only limitation there. So that's your typical setting there. In the split squat and the high bar, usually the setting of that with the feet is some sort of a heel elevation. Going back to the goal, our goal is to get our dorsiflexion to be maxed out. So what this does is it allows, from a structural standpoint, my knee to travel further over my toe because I artificially made my lower leg longer, kind of matching the length of my upper leg. So it just makes distribution from one to the other a little bit more equal, which again gives me more mobility because structurally I changed myself a little bit. And typically for most people, they're going to be around that 20-degree setting or maybe 15 degrees, okay? But the heel elevation is chosen by what was on that previous list. You're only heel elevated as high as it takes for you to max out knee flexing and hip flexing at the same time. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to create as much torque around that knee joint and as much tension in the quads as we possibly can. So that's kind of like the most common routes that most people go, okay? It isn't cut and dry for everybody, but if you have a question of what am I most suitable for, well, those are kind of the two scenarios, and then the varieties off of those two scenarios that I use most on clients. So why is this thing great for coordination? Okay, well, first of all, the only stability that you have is the ground. And then as the exercise goes lower logistically to the floor, your lever length is getting longer. Your knee is getting further away from your hips, okay? Which means that the exercise is getting exponentially heavier as you get into the bottom of this squat. In the bottom of this squat, you actually are very strong. Your quads are strong here. They're very strong. All right, but the problem is we don't spend enough time down there. As you become more and more strong, this exercise has a very, very sneaky and innate ability to be loaded very heavy. And if you're curious about that, if you question that, just go onto Instagram or go into books and see what like your average guy is doing for just repetitions on squat. It's not uncommon anymore to see strong guys train their quads and do 405 pound quad dominant squats for 10 repetitions. So when you become strong in the bottom of that squat, you actually can get some serious load on there. But the downfall is, since the only stability that you have is the ground, well then, there's a lot of things to coordinate. Basically everything from where that bar is loaded on your spine down has some sort of job in being a primary mover or a stabilizing cast member. And so there's a lot of things to coordinate. You not only have to do things like brace yourself, but you have to coordinate that eccentric to where you're not tipping over or falling side to side or favoring one leg over the other leg. You have to have management over that load from literally top of spine vertebrae all the way down to the part that my feet have in contact with the ground. So I have a lot of things to manage. And the general rule is if I'm trying to improve coordination, I want a lot of things working at once. I don't just want my quads working. I want everything working toward this goal of getting my quads to get as much output as possible. So I know the question right now is going to be, well, why, Bryce? Is that a great quad exercise? Well, again, even though the quads may not be the only muscle group working, we're not 100% isolating them. I can guarantee you that if your legs are getting stronger and you are indeed getting to that extreme of a fully lengthened position, so a fully lengthened position is the goal of that, and you're doing that every single repetition, that is a loaded extreme for those quads, and they are going to grow, or they are going to get strong. But I can tell you one thing, you will develop some serious skill and coordination in that bottom position because you've gotten to that with such high quality repetitions over and over and over, and you increase that variable of having ownership in that lengthened position over and over and over, that you will become very coordinated in all other exercises. Here's the reality. That is the most unstable exercise you possibly can do, especially the split squat. You literally are on one leg. You know, you have the stability, a little bit of a back leg. You have the stability of holding on to a rack or something, but it's a very unstable exercise. So everything after that or anything else is actually going to be a regression in the requirement of coordinating parts of your body. Everything else is going to either be a machine or it's going to be some sort of application that has a little bit more stability to push into, so that the plus side is you're going to be able to get hopefully more output out of the quads because you can isolate force into there more, tension into there more, but at the same time, you're not going to develop coordination and skill of coordinating a squat in general as fast as you would in that free weight squat. And that is why that is my favorite exercise for coordinating the skill of contracting and having ownership of my quads in general. The second one we are looking at here is output. Number 2 is what is my favorite exercise for output in general? Well, as I get my other marker, since I love to draw in colors, in general, my favorite is the hack squat. And reason being, if we came from a barbell squat setting, the goal is exactly the same. This gets my quads into a fully lengthened position, okay? And a traditional hack squat is heaviest in the bottom, just like a free weight squat for quads, heaviest and hardest in the bottom. The only progression as far as getting output goes is now I can get more muscular output rather than systemic output, going from a free weight exercise to a more stabilized machine exercise. And that's why you're going to get more output out of the hack squat. I always advise people, I know it's really popular to do some sort of band application, some sort of accommodating resistance, whether it's banded hack squats or reverse banded hack squats. They don't do anything different to the profile, but they are different in a sense to how the feel is going to go and also how long performance can last in each one of those settings. That's not for this video, that's for another time. But I always advise everybody to start at a traditional hack squat because you need to get used to having ownership of the bottom of that hack squat. If you go right in, don't have ownership of the bottom of that hack squat, you're really crappy down there, and you have the habit of bouncing in and out of that bottom where the biggest bang for your buck is, where the only extreme of that exercise for the quads is in that exercise, right? We only get to the lengthen extreme. We don't get to the shorten extreme. So I need to get down there. I need to spend some time down there. I need to find out how to seriously get some output out of my quads down there, produce some serious tension down there. If I apply a band and I haven't already done that or mastered that, the band has the tendency to take away from that. It just promotes even more bouncing, even more bounding, even crappier form. So the prerequisite, spend some time feeling what the bottom of the hack squat is. And then, as you get better, the progression of the hack squat is the band. Well, now, since I applied a band to it and I applied it properly, I have all kinds of videos on my Instagram, guys, about how to apply a band to a hack squat properly. And I also have at least 20 minutes of information in the execution program talking about that, which you have access to right now. If you apply a band to that properly, the bottom of the hack squat without the band is the hardest part. It's exponentially getting heavier as my joints are becoming less and less stacked, right? So my knee is getting further away from my hip and is getting out over my toe. That exercise is getting exponentially harder and the load is getting heavier and heavier. Now if I apply a band, I have the bottom that is the hardest, right? And I have the middle that as the band gets more slack or actually starts to get tighter, it's becoming harder too, so it's equal in output. And then I have the top, the band is getting even more slack and the load on the machine is getting heavier, or vice versa. If I did a regular banding scenario, the top is exponentially hard. So I have equal output throughout the entire range. And what that means is if I only had 4 inches of high output in a traditional hack squat, and now I have 18 to 20 inches of really high output because that band accommodated that, flattened out that strength profile, made my output equal. Now I have even more output out of a hack squat. So I made a hack squat even better. I made it a superhero hack squat. And that right there is, without even going any deeper, why I choose the hack squat as my favorite exercise for output. But if we go back to my list of prerequisites, let's think about this. What does this do? It gets to an extreme. That was on that list, right? It's a large range of motion. That's on that list. The machine allows me to brace a little easier. That's on that list. Most people get into a good hack squat. A hack squat's set up well enough to where they don't get in there with pain. That's on that list, so no pain there. And then this is also something that nearly every person, if they're taking their sets to almost their full capacity every single time, like whatever they can mentally and physically tolerate every single time, you can progress this for a very, very long time. Look at that, guys. That is why those prerequisite lists are so important. That hack squat meets that standard and gives me a little bit more output. I get less coordination, but I get more output. And that is number 2. Okay, guys, you can pause the video. If you have questions about the hack squat, the reverse band hack squat, please put them in the comments by all means. Last one here, as I erase my board. Number 3, loading and safety. So what do I mean by loading and safety? Are they even the same? Why are they together? Well, I will tell you why. Okay, I'm looking for an application that isn't like the others, that has its own benefits and has its own downfalls. And the downfalls that it has, these other 2 applications make up for those downfalls. So I'm looking for an exercise application from a loading standpoint that I can make the heaviest of the 3. And then from a safety standpoint, as far as thinking goes, I don't have to think a whole lot. So if I'm a person who's a beginner, I don't have a lot of experience of what it feels like to actually get my quads to do work. Maybe I really haven't felt a real like quad burn or quad contraction. This exercise application kind of takes all the thinking out of it, to where if I just get in, unrack it and go, there's your hint, unrack and go, I can kind of find my quads without having to think about it. But also it has the most bracing. It assists with the most stability, so I don't have to think about coordinate a bunch of extra body parts to brace and keep me safe. The application allows for that. So if you haven't guessed it already, it's not rocket science, guys. A lot of you guys are very smart out there, and I trust you. Without further ado, your last and third exercise is the quad dominant leg press. Let's go back to the checklist. Let's go back to the tally sheet. What's the one downfall of the leg press? Well, you know, it's usually comfortable. Most people can do it. It's something I definitely can progress. It has amazing bracing, but the one downfall is that its range of motion is down. However, since its range of motion is down, let's also think about where the quads are at, like logistically, as far as their muscle length goes. Go back to function, go back to anatomy. And I'll just kind of review here for you if you really don't know anything about it. The quads have two actions. Four of the muscles of the quads are kind of primarily responsible for some sort of leg extension in different varying degrees of that knee flexion, knee extension, but they basically extend that knee. And then a secondary function of one of the muscles of the quads, the rectus femoris, is that it flexes the hip. So we're looking for this to be a shortened extreme. We're looking for this to be a lengthened extreme, hip extension and knee flexion. We've kind of gotten that in these first two exercises. But what if I wanted something that I could like do a little bit heavier and still be safe? Could I find that? How would I do that? Well, I might find an exercise that's in the middle that kind of works. Maybe this position. What's that look like? That's a leg press. Okay, that's why people love the leg press. That's why you see so many people that put 40 plates on the leg press and the range of motion is like this big. Yes, they are kind of like bastardizing that a little bit. They can get more range of motion, but the range of motion definitely is limited. But with less range of motion, most cases, if I have command, if I have the prerequisite of coordination, the potential for load dramatically goes up. That's why you see those heavy leg presses. And if I want to take it a step further, if I've mastered the ability to coordinate that exercise, if I've gotten good at output out of that, if I use the stability the best that I possibly can, and I apply a band to it, now that range of motion is even more effective, because like the hack squat, I'm not only working the most in the bottom of that leg press, I'm working the most in the bottom, in the middle, and the top. So for me personally, I never leg press without a band on it. I don't care if it's for hips like glutes and hamstrings, or if it's for knees like quads. I never go without a band, because the range of motion is so limited, and I want to make that range of motion as effective and as challenging as possible. Effectiveness should make things more challenging. If effectiveness doesn't, it's not an effective form of accommodating resistance. So the band should only make things harder, along with your skill and your ability to have work ethic and contract effectively. Okay, so that's why I like the leg press. I like the ability for you to load it. Now let's think about that leg press. That leg press in most cases is kind of like this. All right, and a lot of times you'll have a platform might be something like that you push. Okay, so the range of motion is limited, because for most people, as that thing comes in, if my body's here, my hips get into flexion much faster than my knees get to fully flex. Okay, so if this is the degree of my knee flexion, think about those squats that we did before that. It's not near as much. It's not getting into that lengthened extreme. So from a tempo standpoint out there, guys, I'm not really a fan of you doing a leg press to the point where these hips want to buckle and roll under. So it's very important that you use that stability the best that you can. And every single leg press, there's always a set of handles in there. And your hands, this is my shoulder joint, this is my elbow joint, your hands should be pulling those hips in there very hard. Because as this platform comes down, as your knees start to bend, and if they go beyond where they can bend in conjunction with these hips, that pelvis is going to roll over. The only thing that prevents it is, number one, the intent you're doing with the pad. So you should only be thinking knees up and knees down. It is actually a vertical movement. Knees up, knees down. We're acting on what the quads do. They extend the knees, right? So if I want to lengthen them, knees up. If I want to extend them, knees down. And the hips will follow along for the ride. But in addition, I'm burying my hips in there. I'm actively pulling myself down in that leg press. And now what that is doing, excuse me, my gosh, is allowing me to use this really great surface area stability here and here to get as much output as I possibly can. The other suggestion that I have for you guys is from a tempo and a rep standpoint. Your tempo always is in a concentric, so pushing the sled away from you, eccentric sled coming to you. It's always in a tempo that you can manage. So you need to find out what that pace is, but you need to imagine that your tempo is like a piston. You just never stop. Once you unrack that weight, it's fluid and there's finesse to your motion. It never stops. That's going to ensure constant contracting and shortening and lengthening of the quads, but also constant tension, constant movement. And that's really, really important for an output set. It's kind of what the leg press is built for. Those grinding, lactic, burning, mental fortitude, ball building sets are what we're looking for. From a rep standpoint, since that range of motion is so severely down, this isn't always the place where you do 8 to 10 repetitions. This is 100% my opinion coming off of working with so many people in person. This is absolutely an exercise that after I've done, 6 to 10, 6 to 12 repetitions here in these two applications, I'm going to work kind of more in that 15 to 50 repetition. And usually that 50 repetition comes from some sort of a strip set or a cluster set or a rest pause. In CrossFit, we call the rest pauses chippers. Okay, I don't know where they came with that word, but I like to use it because it sounds kind of funny. So anyway, that's the tempo that I would suggest. That's the rep scheme that I would suggest. Higher reps since the range of motion is down. Constant motion, constant tension with the tempo, just because, again, the range of motion is down. And we kind of want to stay away from those knee joints being completely stacked. It's not super, super safe for your spine in that position, especially if you've done what I suggested and you band that thing very, very heavily. Okay, so that is it, guys. That is my top 3 favorite quad exercises for this video. I really would appreciate your feedback. I'd appreciate you giving me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it if you could share this video with somebody that could be of benefit to this thing, could actually get some help. So spread this thing of, I'd love to have this movement of good information going out there that's just not about commercially selling something, but that is actually about giving back, paying forward, giving good information that helps you kind of think for yourself rather than always look for people to answer all of your ailing questions for you. They give you all the things on paper that leads you to always answer all the questions on your own. That's the fastest way you're going to learn, but it's also going to be the fastest way that you produce results. And these 3 exercises, let me tell you something. If you just do those in a workout by themselves, and you grind those guys out for 2 to 3 hard working sets to your capacity in those applications, your quads are going to grow. And I want to hear all about it. Drop a comment, subscribe to this channel, sign up, guys, for the execution program, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.